Do I start? Okay. Okay, so hello, I am Luuk Schipperheyn. I was asked to talk here with Jochem, and I think maybe because there is a similarity in the kind of profile we have, being design tech people who also make music, so that's what I'm going to talk about for a little while. My background is in industrial design. I studied industrial design in Eindhoven at the TU, and I think it's a place that's similar to here, only it's more academic and less exciting, in my opinion. So people who go there usually, well, they can either end up with their own design studio or be a design researcher at a university or one of the big tech companies, or and you also have people like me who just really like to make things with Arduino. And that's kind of what I developed further when I graduated and started my working life. And so I'm going to show you some of the stuff I made as a programmer, and after that some of the music stuff. And maybe it connects, maybe it won't. We'll see. So okay, I forgot to set a timer. Okay. All right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so as a kind of design tech developer, I think what's unique about my position is that I understand the design process as a developer, which enables me to work with designers in a project that's way more vaguely defined than usually is the case. So this might be a good example. For this project, I worked together with graphic designer Ruiter Jansen. He makes data landscapes, as he calls them, which means that he dives really deep into a subject, gets all the data that is about the subject, and physically lays it out before him, and then it usually results in a nice picture for in the newspaper. And for this project, we wanted to see what would happen if his data landscapes were in the digital realm and interactive. So this is what we ended up with. He went to South Africa and did research into the history of apartheid, came up with this typical Ruiter Jansen data landscape. And yeah, we added a layer of interactivity. You can literally look around and zoom in on different chapters and subjects. So you can, so the navigation of the story becomes kind of non-linear. And if you're curious about the who, then you click into the chapter called Who, and you can find out all kinds of stuff. So yeah, this might be typical for my role as a developer who also knows the design process, because this outcome wasn't defined before we started, and we got to this really by experimenting, iterating. I think the first prototype was done in PowerPoint, just having some of his photos and making them clickable, seeing what works. And yeah, this is what we ended up with. Some other stuff. This I made together with the great designer Florian van Zandwijk. This is for Lima, a platform we made in times of COVID, where they could do online presentations, online colloquia. And well, instead of having a website that's also linear, this is something that allows people to browse in a kind of more a getting lost kind of way. It's kind of cluttered with all these windows, and you can just find your own way in here. And so this is one example of the pages they made for this. This is an online exhibit for Amalia Ullman. And there was also a live conversation in here that's now maybe gone, I don't know. And and this is another example of something they made with this recently for the Transformation Digital Art colloquium. Right, okay, so on to the next thing. Another website, we made for Amsterdam Museum when the Gouden Koets, the golden carriage, was placed in the museum. We made a website for that with some information about it. Here we embedded some 3D stuff about the carriage into the website. just a normal website like you see, but here on top it does some like unconventional stuff, you could say, with animations and 3D stuff. And it was there was also a installation going through the country, asking people what their opinions were about the golden carriage. That's my favorite part. So whenever people speak into this installation, what they think about it, it automatically ends up here on this website, and you can see what this guy thinks about it. What, if you want to know.
Oh. Hallo, ik ben Edwin en wat mij betreft mag de ruimtekoets blijven rijden. Dat hoort bij onze geschiedenis, dat hoort bij onze cultuur. En ook de panelen der koloniën, wat mij betreft, mag dat ook blijven bestaan.
Okay, thank you, Edwin. Well, right. So yeah, and there's loads of people in here that you can see. Okay, so that's like the front-end web stuff. Then I also do like some physical stuff, or this example is for a Nike shop. We made, yes, so what you see here are all e-paper displays, A5 size passive displays. They had like an enormous shop in Paris, and they had too many light-emitting displays, so they wanted something passive. And this is a video of like me trying to make this stuff work, and eventually we made an enormous display that consisted out of 600 of these screens. And here you see a little snippet, this thing up top here. And it allowed designers from Nike to upload images to a kind of Dropbox folder, and then it would, the images would be added to a sequence here. I see that my time is running out now. Or are we not so strict?
No.
But all right. But maybe I should fast forward to the music stuff. Yeah. So during my studies, the first thing way in which I combined all the making stuff with the music stuff was at STIME, where I did my internship and also studied later. And this is a project we did with a group of jugglers and a composer, Tom Johnson. With juggling balls that made sound, and you can hear it. Yeah. Yeah, so that, yeah, oh wait, oh, he's now doing the thing. So this develops into something where they end up, I think, playing a chord. Right. Yeah, and I'm gonna skip some more things and fast forward to the rest of the music stuff. So yeah, I read Jochem's thesis. And part of it was about the materiality of software, you could say. Like, how does the functionality and limitations of the software dictate or inform the stuff you make? And I just wanted to show how the software I work with informs the sounds I create and the music I make. So I have a little example here. This, what you see here, is a Euclidean sequencer, which is a kind of nerdy way of telling your computer to play notes. So normally, when you use music software like this, you are very like deterministic in saying, okay, I want this note to play on the first beat, this one to play on the third. But you can do it in different ways, and this sequencer kind of is a little bit complicated and a little bit abstracted, and because of that, it invites you to just fiddle around, not knowing what you're doing, and that will create the music. So you have to look at the row up top. This makes the cake, right? This pattern, And if I turn this knob right here, it just adds more hits. And it does it in a way that it's spread as evenly as possible across the grid, right? And I can add more layers, like a side stick and a snare, you know? And that's usually what I do. Like I find a new piece of software and I start just like playing with all the stuff, and actually the more complex it is, the more fun I think it is, because that allows me to surprise myself, you know, and then something comes out that I never thought of before. And if you replace the drum samples with different kind of samples, you get this, right? Something like this. And this actually ended up becoming a song. Wait, I have to shut this down. Here you go. This one. So right, so like playing with the limitations and the what the software allows you to do. Oh, my time is up. Well, that informs what I made, and yeah, now it's time for Jochem to do his part. There you go.
Okay, so I brought the PDF of the text I wrote, the thesis for my graduation. Yeah, this is me, Jochem van der Hoek. So my thesis is it's called Making Things, Software, Materiality, and the Value of Lo-Fi. And for me, it's a bit about thinking when you make stuff on your computer with software, like to think about the software as a material. So what are the qualities of this software, and how does this influence you, and how can you be aware of this and let it help you, kind of, instead of it getting in your way of making something that you want to make. And the lo-fi part is kind of that a term from music, and by reflecting on things from music, but then seeing it in a bigger scope of also like visual stuff and just kind of making stuff in general, I found out that, at least for me, the lo-fi as a method is really helpful in thinking about these things or working with these things. So maybe I just scroll through it and maybe show the images, and yeah, so I kind of this is an image of just someone cutting wood with an axe, and that's kind of an example of when you're cutting wood, you're not in Zoom. Yeah, should be possible. Yeah. So yeah, this is an example from a text that I referenced, that when you cut a piece of wood with an axe, it's not, you think like, oh, I want a piece that looks like this and has this shape. You just cut it and it breaks based on the nerves of the wood. So kind of the material itself has decides the shape it will have, and you can't say like I cut it and it's gonna be this shape. So that's kind of, for me, a really clear example of just following what the material wants to do. And I think that you can also do that when you work with software, because I have here this example of two drawings made with different software. So this is a drawing made in Illustrator, and Illustrator wants you to draw smooth lines and curves or perfectly straight lines. And this is made with Microsoft Paint, and there you just have kind of mostly freehand drawing tools. So then you end up with stuff like this, and it's more like and I think like you could make this in Microsoft Paint, the first image, if you would really want to, but that would just be really hard, and then you're kind of going against what the material wants you to do. And same as this, if you would make this in Illustrator, it's also kind of not what the material wants you to do. So this is for me a clear example of like choosing the drawing software you use. That's also kind of just a creative choice separately from what you're actually drawing, I think. Let's see, of text. And then here I kind of go to how music relates to this for me, because this is a Roland TR-707 drum machine, and a song, I referenced a song that is Washing Machine by Mr. Fingers, which is like a kind of house song of the beginnings of house music. And then first it was maybe one of the first times with electronic music that I could really relate to the sound, because I actually understood how it was made and why it sounded the way it does. Because before I would make music, like I would play piano or keyboards, but kind of just electronic music just made with electronic instruments feels unrelatable, because it's not when you play piano, it's something completely different. At least that's how I would see it. Then these machines that I don't really understand how they work, and then I don't really understand what is made with those machines. But then with this song, it's made with this drum machine and with a Juno synthesizer. And then I kind of read stuff about it, and I realized why it sounded the way it did, because of when you connect this to the synthesizer and play and have the sequencer function, you play a certain amount of notes, but then it's triggered by the notes of the other machine. And if these notes are not the same number of notes, then every time this machine will play a trigger, it is triggering a different note on the synthesizer. So you get these weird patterns that you wouldn't really think of playing that when you're just playing piano, but just based on how these machines work together, you get to this point. And so in an interview with the musician, he also said it that it was something that just happened in the midst of me experimenting, and I got it on tape. So it's not that he was just sitting and thinking like, oh, I want to make a song that sounds like this or this kind of song, but he just plays with the material, and the material kind of guides him to make this song, and it ends up to be a really influential song for house music. Then it goes on to lo-fi, so what it actually means in music and where it comes from. So that is a bit of the history of recording of music, because when music recording technology kind of started, at some point quite quickly it became was used by professional music studios that would record bands that would just play in front of a microphone. And then the goal of the studio technicians was to have a recording that sounds the way you would hear it if you are at a performance of these musicians. So kind of as neutral as possible, and but for that sometimes you would have to do weird things, because a microphone in a studio is not the same as sitting in a live performance. So then certain artists would have to move away from the microphone, or when they're playing to make something louder, someone would move them on wheels closer to the microphone, and which is kind of, for me, an example of kind of like working against the material, because you have to kind of work around what these machines do to get something what you think it should sound like. And that was kind of like what hi-fi studios were doing. But then these technologies became more available, and people could buy machines like this, that they could record music at home in multiple tracks and could could be their own music studio. And then there were people that were playing with this kind of as an instrument, and not trying at home to make a professional sounding recording, but just seeing what can these machines do, and maybe just messing around with it, or playing with imperfections of the sound. Like if you put it loud, it distorts the sound, and then that can also be a good thing, or yeah, stuff like that. And that is kind of what the lo-fi music movement started. Yeah, so for me, it's, in that sense, is lo-fi is just really clear way of just working with what the material wants you to do in a way, or just reflecting on what can this machine do, and what can I do with it? Yeah. So, okay. This is an image. This later, there when in the hip hop music, there was also some kind of form of lo-fi of people that kind of liked the sound of samples that sound a bit crappy of cassette tapes or vinyl records or records that are really old and don't sound really good anymore, and that also became kind of a genre on its own. Only then something happened that production on computers became way more available and way more easy, so there's not really a reason to sample something in low quality, because on the computer you can just have a digital file and sample it in high quality, but people still like the sound. So then it's kind of, then you go to things like this, like a program that simulates the sound of a old vinyl record in your laptop. So you just take a perfectly good sound file, but it sounds like it's an old vinyl record, and then that became kind of associated with lo-fi for maybe the last 10 or 20 years, because you have all these people that produce like lo-fi hip-hop music, but it's kind of, for me, it's kind of the opposite of lo-fi, because lo-fi was seeing what the machine does and playing with that, and this is kind of making your computer, your material do something that is not really inherent to it, because there's no vinyl noise in digital sound files. So then I think kind of the meaning got lost, at least in a bigger sense. Like when you Google lo-fi now, most results are this kind of music streams that just became very popular. And then, that's kind of the final point I make in my text, that I want people to realize what lo-fi meant and how that is still relevant when you make things now. So not trying to make your tools do something that they don't want to do, but just see their qualities and use those and show those in your creations. Yeah, I think that's mostly it. Okay.
Oké. Ja, waar ik aan moest denken toen jij... what I thought of when reading your thesis was the question, if you have the example of the microphones, what's his name?
Phil Alfaro.
Yeah, right. He worked with the limitations of the hardware that he had to work with, and kind of amplified the stuff that other people would deem ugly or would polish away, right?
Yeah.
And kind of co-opted that as an aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
And so what I was thinking as I read your thesis, what are the things that we would co-opt now? What are the things about the machines we work with right now, in audio or visual, whatever, that we would polish away, that we could co-opt as a power, something like that? Is that something you use?
I think so. It's also, I give some examples in my text also. For me, like example that I like in music is maybe audio clipping.
Yeah.
So when you put something too loud, it just gets distorted, and but you can, and people like in music production, you're not supposed to do that, and
redlining.
Or if you export a song and it is just super loud and in red, and then you give it to someone who is gonna master the song, they will come back to you like, okay, I'm not gonna master this for you because this is not how
There's no dynamics left.
this is not how it works and we can't use this, and
Yeah.
just like people are not people don't, that's what people polish out, like the levels of and the mixing. But I like when I make music often to put some stuff just super loud,
Yeah.
because it also just it messes some stuff up, which I like in a
Yeah.
way, and not thinking like, oh, is this too loud or is this, but just when when you're making music, you think, oh, I like this, I'm gonna put it louder because you're feeling it or how
Yeah.
it sounds, and then not afterwards saying, oh, this is too loud or this I should polish this way, but just leaving it like that.
Yeah.
And then some people might say, oh, this is a bad mix, but you can also say this is a creative choice,
Yeah.
and I like the way it sounds.
Yeah.
Or maybe similarly with like compression, like a low quality MP3 file. You also hear it sometimes in certain types of music that people purposely
Yeah.
export stuff in in low quality, and same with images like I give the example of deep fried memes,
Yeah.
which is super popular type of image, but it's breaking with what people think of as a good image because it's super distorted by how compressed it is over and over again, or super saturated, and like kind of just purposely choosing to not have a
Yeah,
polished
exactly.
image. Like, so I
And really
think
using that. Yeah. Yeah. And
so,
and
yeah,
and the clipping you do is specifically in the digital domain, right? Because
yeah,
maybe you could say that Jimi Hendrix kind of did that
yeah, exactly.
in an analog way, pushing
Mhm.
his tube amp to the max.
Yeah, that's what the distortion is on the
Yeah.
guitar, right? Like, or now you buy it as a pedal or sometimes digitally
Yeah.
simulated.
So it becomes an emulation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Which is also kind of
that what
weird.
you want to stay away from?
I mean, I also not, maybe it's a point I make, but I'm also not like super purist about it,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
simulations are also super fun,
Yeah.
and maybe the simulations are also kind of a inherent thing of the digital
Yeah.
material. So it's also a bit of a paradox.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the first analog synthesizers were made to emulate the sounds of maybe a horn or something.
Yeah,
Really
exactly.
badly actually. And then we got digital means of producing stuff, and then we started emulating the old analog synths.
synthesizer. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's the next step, right?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting, and it's yeah.
Well, it's also you using the clip art CD-ROMs, right? It's in
Yeah.
current times it becomes a kind of a kind of, is it ironic?
No, for me not, because I just like the images.
Yeah.
So, and I
Uh-huh.
like to show them on a big projection.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm making fun of them in any way. I'm just
No.
saying this is a nice image and
Yeah.
this is interesting on its own.
But you're repurposing them, giving them a new function, really. or not?
Yeah, because I feel, yeah, I mean, because I think they're made to use in maybe flyers or
Yeah.
websites or just any type of media, just as, oh, I need an image of this, and I get it from my CD-ROM and just put it in my file. And for me, I don't use it for for something or in order to communicate but just showing the image as an image.
Yeah. In itself, yeah, it's really good.
I feel that's with with the whole project. I think like not kind of the also
Not
with,
disguising something or something like
yeah,
that.
like same with the post-it notes, not having a post-it note in order to communicate something, but just to look at the post-it note as what it is, a yellow square of paper
Yeah.
that you can stick on something, which is just nice for me that it
Yeah.
exists. Like it's fun to look at and to play
Yeah.
with. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's in a way that like the most authentic use of the medium. Or
Yeah,
something.
maybe.
Yeah, cool. And there was another thing I wanted to ask about process. In terms of writing stuff, like the Larry Hurt example you told me, and I also had an example of like the Euclidean sequence and stuff
Mhm.
surprising me. Is there stuff you do to surprise yourself or to Like have the medium dictate what you make?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, lately I do that maybe more with by using kind of preset stuff in a way, which is maybe kind of the opposite of getting surprised, but also works in a similar way thing, because with the sequencer you use, you get things that you don't know what is gonna happen.
Yeah.
And with a preset sound or kind of preset image, which are these clip arts also are, or these papers, it's kind of like, it's also something you wouldn't make yourself, just as the sequencer is something you wouldn't come up with.
Right.
But then still seeing how does this fit in my view of the world, or how can I communicate something through these things that are just there. And I feel that's a bit similar with a sequence like that. The sequence is just there within how the machine works.
Yeah.
And then you think, okay, I can use it with this sound and with this sound, and like kind of relating to it, but not making it out of your own mind. And I feel that's
introducing like an alien element into your own stuff, and then having to work with that.
Yeah. So I sometimes, and I feel that's for me, that feels also really related to lo-fi in a way that some maybe in making music or in making images, then it's kind of not, it's like a weird thing to use presets, or at some point that is
sometimes
a phase people go
becomes
through.
frowned upon.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. In certain groups of people, like, oh, this is just Ableton preset. Oh, you didn't design this sound.
Yeah.
Or also with stock footage, and now it's actually used a lot in art, but at some point it's also like, yeah, this is just stock footage, and it's not, then people don't find that meaningful. But I think now you see people reclaiming these stock images or presets as their own, and saying, yeah, this sound is just there, and this is what the computer wants to do, or what is just in it, and I just use it to tell my own story.
Yeah, I guess it's also kind of an ego thing to not want to use the presets and
and I think it's funny that it's kind of a counter, because that was a thing, and now people are kind of using presets to oppose that, and then it becomes interesting again, or funny to, like, no one would ever use this sound, but then you use it, so then it's suddenly personal again, even though you didn't make it.
Yeah, I'm like that with, do you know Splice?
Yeah, that is
like a huge library of
right. Yeah, I never used it, but I know some people that use it.
Yeah, I also don't like it, because like modern hip hop producers sometimes just splice together some loops, and I'm like, come on. But maybe it's the same. I'll look at it in a few years.
I have a bit the same. I also don't like it, so it feels a bit like. But then, maybe might change. But I do similar stuff. But then that I think is okay. But then when I feel this, then it feels too easy or something, which is kind of weird, because, I don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah. But, do you need to manipulate it to a certain extent, or no? I don't know.
Yeah, but for me, what I don't like about Splice is also that it's a paid subscription. Then it becomes because I like just getting existing melodies or sounds, download them off YouTube or freesound.org or something, and then it's like, oh, I just found this. But otherwise you're paying someone to curate these sounds for you, and then you make a song out of it. But then it feels, the whole
Plunder Phonics thing is kind of gone then.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's already curated.
Yeah.
And I feel I should be the one curating it, or I want to be at least the one curating.
Yeah, well.
I have a question
to
both of you.
Yeah.
How do you see, or when do you know that you are aware of the medium that you're using, like the software that you're using, or are you ever fully aware of the qualities of it? And does it bore you once you figured it out for yourself, do you feel like? Or does it actually excite you because you understand what's going on?
I feel that's a good question, but I think you're never fully aware, but maybe at some point you just think you are aware of it, at least, and then, because for a different person, it has a different function, and people from different culture would, but then it's,
It's always in relation to what you're able to do with it, right? Maybe in Photoshop you have certain effects or methods that you like to use, right? And that becomes like the path you always take. But within that set of possibilities, somebody else would do something completely different.
Yeah, that's where the illustrative versus paint.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
That's sort of,
Yeah, but also your personal preferences and your skills and what you're used to doing. And also in relation to what you asked, I was thinking like, so in order to surprise myself, I usually make stuff by first making a system that like poops out lots of noise, and then I have to learn how to kind of tame it. And but because of my nature of always wanting to have a new system, something, that surprises me in a different way, this becomes a kind of how do you say, difficult to master, right? You need a certain amount of time to really learn with maybe like a setup of certain hardware things that you connected to each other. But then, actually right before I've mastered it, I kind of move on to the next thing, which can be kind of a shame.
So it's more about your own need to explore and to just find new paths and go around and search for stuff, and then once you bump into it, you can actually master it, or you can take it.
But I'll probably never be at a point where I work with a certain system as long enough to actually master it,
Yeah.
But maybe I should just embrace that. Yeah.
I feel about that. That's maybe why, at least in the project that I'm presenting there, or it's also maybe a system that I made. Like, oh, if you do this, this happens. But then maybe that's why I like extremely simple systems, because then I do feel I completely mastered it immediately, because it's just literally one, like with the snare drum, you play the snare drum and it shows an image.
Yeah.
And there's not really anyone immediately understands the system.
Yeah.
And then I also like that in a way, and it still can, just to create the systems that are
simple.
Yeah, like the simplest form of a system like that. But that's. Yeah.
I do agree with that it will allow you to make more like complex things because you understand the whole thing. But somehow I'm not like that. My tendency is to make complex systems and then be unable to tame them. Yeah. Yeah.
More questions.
Two great minds together.
I have one thing that sort of, like maybe you already talked about this.
Yeah.
I was a little earlier, I was thinking, this is mostly about the music stuff, which you can relate to other things as well, but like when I look at your work, Jochem, like there's kind of this notion that I think it requires more talent, or I think it's more interesting when people use things that are really easy and make good work with it, because there's people, like FX Twin made the Cheetah EP on some sort of super hard to use synthesizer, and he had to spend like hours and hours learning it, and then he makes really complex good music with it. And I'm like, okay, but that's, of course it's going to be super complex and good because you spent 10,000 hours learning it, but aren't you much more talented when you can take something like Fruity Loops that takes one afternoon to download and fully understand, and then make something interesting with it?
Yeah, I think both are valuable, they're also different, but I do think, like with the Fruity Loops, maybe it's like a lot of just like modern rap music is producing Fruity Loops, and then it's always a thing like, oh, anyone could make a trap beat, and that is kind of true. Like you could watch a video and you kind of know how to put a 808 and a snare drum and hi-hats, but then there's kind of a few things you can do, but then still somehow for some people it just works out really well, and they get not necessarily because they spend a lot of work on it, but they just are able to reflect on it really well, or
Yeah, and that becomes an art form that becomes about vibe or something like that.
yeah, like
right?
you don't have to be
Yeah,
super skilled to do it, but or it's a skill, but it's not maybe a skill in the sense of
like
technology, but
lots
more-
of people can get to a certain level really easily, but then to get out of that to go above that requires a kind of I don't know, a special talent, I think. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
also thinking, I think maybe both of you also just don't like predefined. When things are predefined for you,
Yeah.
but you also like to play with that. So it's like you with the Xerox printer and the colors and the stickers and like using those things and making them your own, even though they're so much sort of standardized, but then taking that as a tool to sort of resist, it feels like, as a viewer at least. So you can really always also predict how things will turn out if you just have these things all around constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's the fun to kind of work around that and tame it. What was the Greek word you had in your thesis?
the helomorphism.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of that, right?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it's like old philosophical term, and I don't know if I understand it fully, but this is how I use it or got it. It's kind of the idea that something exists of like a idea and the physical matter of it. So it's like, and
They
then
exist
you would
separately.
and then if you think, yeah, exactly, like, and then if you would make something, it feels like you have an idea already, regardless of the physical thing, and then by putting it together, it becomes a physical thing. But my point was maybe that they can't really exist separately, or they don't exist separately.
But it made me think of like Beethoven or Mozart, like thinking of a composition in their head, like like not connected to any physicality, and then having somebody play that or something.
Yeah, but then still that composition is based on the system of music notation or based on the instruments that exist at that time.
Yeah.
And it's not something like, they think of how could this instrument be used, or the skills they use are also already existing, so it's always a bit like just your reflection on the things that there are, and it's not something, not really the other way around.
Yeah. Florian is signaling,